And greetings, everyone. How's everybody doing this morning? Oh, we can do better than that. How's everybody doing this morning? Oh, my goodness. It is so great to see you all. I am so excited. Eldon and I have been anxiously awaiting. This is my partner, Eldon Christensen. Say hello to Eldon, everyone.
How are you doing?
And I'm Jeff. You guys may know me. It is truly a pleasure to be here. We've been holding the wraps. One of the hardest jobs, parts of our job is to honestly keep the secrets in. And we have been waiting for this session for a long time. Without any further ado, this is what's new in Windows Server v.next. Let's talk about agenda. First item up for bids is your top request. Your number 1. Not your number 10, not your number 100, your top request. We're going to get right to that. We're going to talk next generation Active Directory and SMB, mission critical data and storage, Hyper-V and AI. What did he just say? That's right, Hyper-V and AI. We're going to talk container flexibility. We're going to talk about another one of your top requests. It's either number 2 or number 3. And then finally, we're going to talk about a modern server experience. So we are in the takeoff position. Everybody strap yourself in. It's time to talk about Windows Server v.next. And let's talk about one of your favorite, absolute favorite features that happens to be used by our friends over in Xbox. So when it comes to mission critical, the Xbox team has been using Windows Server Azure Edition hot patching. They absolutely love it. To give you perspective, they have over 1,000 servers running in 18 different services. They're running between 2 and 120 SQL servers, and some workloads have been running for over 15 years. This started off completely on physical, it moved into virtual, and now it's all Azure VMs. Now, obviously, this is mission critical because if you can't play your games, that's it. It's end times. Nobody wants to hear about that. It's big trouble. So for patching, the team obviously had a way to do this. It's been automated at a complete process, and hot patching took 3 weeks out of every month to roll out the updates across the entire infrastructure without any downtime. And this happened, of course, 12 times a year. With Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition, they went to patching all 1,000 servers in less than 48 hours. That is not a typo. First of all, I want to say they sent us candy. It was kind of nice. The Xbox team was pretty happy about this. They're like, wow, this is a massive time saver because this can all happen in real time. Let me show you. Let's talk about hot patching. So hot patching is a new way to install updates that doesn't require a reboot and won't interrupt your workloads that are running on the server. So let me quickly describe this demo environment. So you can see I've got the right-hand and the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, I have a Windows Server Core VM that I'm going to manually install hot patch updates. Okay, I'm doing this as manual as possible so you can see this. On the left-hand side, for comparison, we have our traditional updates. These are called LCUs, or latest cumulative updates. This is a traditional update. At the bottom, you can see here, I've got 2 sample workloads. These are file copies. I just want to show you we have an active workload that we do not want to disrupt. And at the top of this, we've got a timer so we can actually see in real time the patching that's going on. So let's go ahead and do a traditional versus a hot patch. And in fact, on the left-hand side, we're going to start with the traditional, and I'm going to give it a head start. I'm going to let that thing start first. Okay, so on the left-hand side is the traditional update, and on the right-hand side is, oh, it's done. Did you blink? I'm sorry if you missed it. That's a hot patch. That server's now secured. It's patched. No reboot was required. My copy continued. I feel kind of bad about that. Let's actually do a second hot patch. Okay, so this time you can pay closer attention. We'll do a second hot patch on the right-hand side. Left one's still chugging along. We're at like 12%. So here we are installing a second hot patch, and you can see just like that, it's done. Now, copies continue. Thank you. Thank you. You can see the copies continued without interruption, no change. This all happens in memory. So there's no reboot required. This is happening and it's protecting my running processes. So my security is already heightened and elevated. On the left-hand side, we're still kind of chugging along at that traditional update. Let me go ahead and speed that up a little bit. I don't have a lot of time, and we have a ton of content. So let's go ahead and speed this up to the end. We're at 4 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes, 7 minutes, and okay, guess what? We're done. Now a reboot's required. Now if I reboot right now, guess what's going to happen? I'm going to lose my files, my copy. I don't want to do that, so I'm going to sit around and wait for that. If that isn't impactful, if that isn't showing you why the Xbox team has deployed this in production and has been using this for months and months and months and why they are so happy, I don't know what does. Now this is server core, and I always get asked, okay, Jeff, what about full desktop? Yeah, we got that covered too. So if you're using Windows Server 2022 Azure Edition, guess what? Whether you're using server core or you're using it with the desktop experience, either one, we've got hat patching. So this takes me to your #1 request. Since we released this feature every single day, Jeff, this is great. Hot patching is a game-changing feature. No reboots, no downtime, are you kidding me? Please, Microsoft, I am begging you. We need hot patching everywhere. Not just Azure Edition, not just Azure Edition running on premises on Azure Stack HCI. We need it including VMware and even other clouds. Boom! We are delivering Arc-enabled Windows Server vNext hot patching. What does that mean? It means everybody gets hot patching. You get hot patching. You get hot patching. You get hot patching. My buddy back here gets hot patching. You want that on Windows Server Standard Edition? Done. You want that on Data Center Edition? Done. Physical, virtual, other clouds. That's right. Other clouds. Everybody gets hot patching. Now, it's enabled via the Azure portal with Azure Arc, and yes, there is a monthly subscription. Not going to hide that. I'm going to be super transparent. But it gives you the option to deploy it wherever you'd like, and of course, if you do continue to run this on Azure or Azure Stack, it's no additional charge. It's just included. So everybody gets hot patching in Windows Server vNext. Next, Active Directory. All right, stupid question. How many of you use Active Directory? And every hand goes up. Of course you do. It's the gold standard. It's what we all use for authentication, for identity management. It is the gold standard. Well, I'm excited about what we're delivering in Next Gen AD, and it starts with something. We're going to go back and deliver some scalability improvements. So if you go back to Active Directory in Windows 2000, yes, Windows 2000, the database sizes are 8K pages. That was great for Windows 2000. It was okay for 2003, 2008, but as we've gotten bigger and systems have gotten larger and organizations have gotten bigger, everyone said, we're hitting our head on some of these scalability limitations. So in vNext, we're moving to 32K pages for the database. Now, I want to be super clear. We're going to make this a transparent transaction. I don't want anybody leaving this room freaking out going, oh my gosh, my AD is about to go through some catastrophic major changes. Super simple. So a new domain controller is installed with 32K page database support. Try and say that 3 times fast. But it runs in an 8K page mode for compatibility. Okay, so if it's still talking with legacy domain controllers, oh good, it's transparent, you don't know anything about it. An upgraded domain controller, if you go from an old one to a new one and you do an upgrade, guess what, still 8K pages. You need to actually move to a forest-wide and domain-wide Windows Server vNext domain and forest on all your domain controllers, and you get this new feature and this new capability and this new scalability, and you will stop running into scalability limitations there. Now, speaking of scalability, one of the other changes we're making is, again, if you look back at Active Directory, when we launched it back in 2000, it didn't need to support big systems because the biggest systems that we're shipping were like, 2 and 4 sockets with 1 core each. There was no multi-core. So if you look at Active Directory today, guess what? People are deploying it on servers that have 32, 64, 96, 128 cores on them. And actually, Active Directory doesn't scale to those. So a nice scalability enhancement we've run into for very large organizations is now we've unlocked that. NUMA scalability, we will support more than 64 cores with Active Directory. And then there's just security, and it's just a laundry list of security, and I don't have time to go through every one of these, but there's a few things I want to point out. The top one, LDAP support for TLS 1.3. I am super proud of the investments we made in TLS 1.3 and Windows Server 2022. They are dramatically improving the security for servers everywhere, and now we're bringing this to LDAP and S-channel support for TLS 1.3. When you're communicating with domain controllers using confidential attributes, connection now requires encryption. This used to be optional. It's now, nope, you're making those changes, you have to be on an encrypted network. LDAP prefers encryption by default. Changes to Kerberos, PKInt, cryptographic changes, huge changes across the board, all for scalability and security in Windows Server v.next Active Directory. One other feature here is replication priority. When you're doing an initial replication, so you're doing a replication, and sometimes this could be long distances, long sites, you actually want to give it a boost and say, you know what, for this first one, let's actually give it a priority boost so this will go faster. Instead of just kind of doing this quietly in the background, let's actually push this forward. That's a new capability in vNext as well. We've done some security hardening. We're getting rid of ancient things like mail slots. And the big thing, of course, is there is a new Active Directory functional level. So if you want these features, there's new for us, new domain. And in case you're wondering, because I know someone's going to ask, I'm going to stop you right now, Jeff, are you going to backport these to the last AD? No, not even remotely close. Please don't ask. Not going to happen. Okay? And if you're wondering, Jeff, how do I get to this new version? Because I want all these things. A couple things to point out. You have to be running on at least 2016 or greater for your domain controllers. If you're still running those 2008 and 2012, I'm sorry, I have no pity for you at this point. Those things are ancient. They are out of support. The last thing you should be doing is running domain controllers on stuff that old. So make sure you're at least on 2016, so when vNext rolls around, you'll have a smooth transition to the next release. And then, of course, a big one, and it's kind of AD, but really not AD. It's kind of interesting one. I got to point to my buddy over here, Ned, which is local KDC and local curb. If you haven't been following Ned and myself on social media and our blog posts, we are working fervently to get rid of NTLM. It's on its way to deprecation. 90s technology that needs to go, and it needs to go bad. Yeah. We now have local Kerberos key distribution being built into Windows, not just domain controllers. Kerberos off for local user accounts. This is a big change. Please be following us on Twitter, be following us on our blogs. This is a big change, and this is a huge positive change for everyone. Eldon, I've been talking for a while. It's time for you to talk about some cool storage stuff.
All right, thanks, Jeff. I was sitting there, we were all scratching our heads like, how are we going to make a hot patching demo exciting? Because it's like the least exciting demo ever, right? So we were sitting there scratching our heads going, how are we going to make that exciting? Because it's just like, as infrastructure people, the less exciting something is, the better it is, right? So let's talk about storage for a second and what's happening around storage. So specifically, let's talk about NVMe for a minute. So we wanted to do a lot of optimizations in vNext for the next version of Windows Server around optimizing for NVMe storage. We want to improve performance and reduce CPU overhead associated with NVMe devices. So let's kind of take a look. I got a little comparison of how things are going here. So if you look on your left, you're going to see what Windows Server 2022 is that you know today. On the right is vNext. So you'll notice we're doing 1.1 million IOPS on the left, and on the right we're doing 1.86. So that's a 70% increase in IOPS. And you don't have to do anything. You just have to upgrade. You just have to upgrade from 22 to vNext, and you're going to be running 70% faster with your NVMe device.
Anybody interested in a 70% performance increase? Yes? Awesome.
So that's the start, right? So that's where we're at if you go install the Windows Server an Insider's build today, but we want to do better. So we have a new NVMe native driver coming, which is going to accelerate the performance even greater. So let's look at that same comparison. So if you were to look at what we are today on the left of the 1.1 million IOPS, on the right, we're actually going to get 2.1. So that's actually a 90% increase using the native NVMe driver. It's in preview, so it's coming, but you're going to get 70% on the Insider builds today, and we're going to get you to 90% here pretty quick.
Anybody excited about a 90% storage increase? Come on.
So we want to embrace choice in storage, right? So we have Storage Spaces Direct. If you want to do software-defined storage, we have Spaces. But some of you love the storage you've already paid for or embrace SANs. And so we embrace choice. And so NVMe over Fabric is emerging as kind of the new block connectivity for storage area networks, for SANs. And so we're going to have a new NVMe over Fabric initiator coming in vNext as well. So that's going to be in preview. It's not in the builds today, but it's coming soon. So I want to give everybody a heads up that we're going to embrace NVMe over Fabric. So let's talk about a few other storage enhancements that are coming. So anyone who's using Storage Replica today, we did a bunch of enhancements with the Storage Replica log. And so that's going to give you about a 3x performance improvement. So anybody who's using Storage Replica today. So that's a big performance boost. If you look at some of the enhancements around it, I'm just touching on a few of the things. There's many things we could be talking about here. Another thing I want to talk about is on REFS. So today we have dedupe, and a NTFS dedupe, and we have a new REFS native dedupe coming in vNext. What's different about the two, so the NTFS dedupe you know today is really optimized for cold storage, right? So it's really great with like a file server. You got some data, you touch it, you modify it, and then it's cold on the back end, and then it's going to be deduped. And so the new REFS native dedupe is really optimized for hot data, or enables hot data. So for example, you got a bunch of virtual machines, you got some VHDs, those VHDs are always open, the VMs are running, and it's optimized for those types of scenarios as well. And then if you also look at Azure Stack HCI. So Azure Stack HCI is on an annual release cadence. So once a year, we release Azure Stack HCI. And then Windows Server is on LTSC is on a slightly longer release cadence. Well, we're going to accrue all that value from the core OS into Windows Server as well. So some of those other features you've seen show up in Azure Stack HCI, such as thinly provisioned storage spaces, stretch cluster support for storage spaces direct, those are now going to accrue value into the next version of Windows Server. If we want to take a little bit look at what's happening in clustering, so we do support Active Directory-less AD-less clusters today. And a lot of customers want to go deploy little 2-node clusters out at the edge. You got a little remote store, a factory, and they want to reduce the infrastructure as much as possible. So we allow AD-less clusters. Well, if you want to do virtual machines, there's one thing that doesn't work, and that's doing live migration of VMs. And what good is a Hyper-V deployment without live migration? You can quick migration, but nobody wants that. So now you're going to be able to do a cert-based authentication for live migration, so it has no AD dependencies to be able to do live migration. So now you're out at your remote facilities where you don't want to have local domain controllers, you don't want to have dependencies in case internet connectivity goes down, you can now do cert-based live migration. And again, I talked about we're going to support stretch clusters, and that storage replica performance improvements is a big piece that's going to enable that. We also did like a complete rewrite of cluster where updating just to really kind of improve the reliability and stability. It's now an integrated component into the cluster service.
Love it.
And with that, I'm going to head back to Jeff.
Thank you, Eldon. So, time to switch gears. Love all the storage enhancements. Now let's switch from storage to compute and Hyper-V. And just a quick reminder, I know you probably know this, but I have to say this. Hyper-V is literally used everywhere. And I cannot stress this enough. It is a strategically important technology. Let me say that one more time for the people in back. Hyper-V is a strategically important technology. But don't believe a word I say. Look at where we're using it. This little thing called Azure, I don't know if you heard of that. That's all Hyper-V. That's the Azure Hypervisor system, the Azure Stack family, Windows Server, Windows Client. Containers use it. We use it for platform security throughout, virtualization-based security, all of that stuff. That's all Hyper-V. Oh, guys over on Xbox use it too. By the way, these are the only things I can talk to you about. There's also plenty of other things. Okay? But it is a critically, strategically important technology for us. And we continue to innovate. In fact, just to give you a peek, this was something that Mark Rusinovich posted earlier this week. Here's the Azure Hypervisor system. Anybody need a virtual machine with 1,792 virtual processors with 29.7 terabytes of RAM? Yes, please is the answer. So, we're continuing to innovate. When people say, hey, isn't hypervisor innovation kind of done? We're like, no, not even close. This is just one example. There's a lot more coming. By the way, I should also point out, while we're talking about what's new in vNext, there's so much, we're not able to even tell you everything. This is only the first peek at what's new in Windows Server vNext. So let's talk about Hyper-V and AI. Now, when you think AI, what are you thinking? Well, you saw Jensen on stage with Satya. We were talking GPUs. So let's talk GPUs for a second. If you look at Windows Server 2022, where we are today with GPU support, what does that mean? Well, we have GPU with discrete device assignment. What that means is I can take a full GPU and I can map it inside the virtual machine. In fact, the host doesn't even see it anymore. It's gone. Doesn't even appear in Device Manager. It is completely mapped inside the virtual machine. Now, it's great for workloads that need to consume an entire GPU, but you don't get failover clustering, you don't get live migration, and there's no sharing. So it's literally one virtual machine gets all that GPU. Introducing Windows Server vNext GPU-P support for GPU partitioning. What does that mean? Thank you. Thank you. It means you can share a GPU across multiple virtual machines. You create GPU partitions. You then assign a partition to a virtual machine that supports that capabilities. In terms of management, of course, there's PowerShell and there's Windows Admin Center through WAC. You have full support for live migration and failover clustering. Now, first thing I know I'm going to get asked is, Jeff, can I use this on my 10-year-old server? This is what the requirements are. Number one, SRIOV is required, which is single root I/O virtualization. It's because you need to have the control plane in the host and the data plane running in the guest. It's how we can manage live migration. It requires AMD Milan or later, or Intel Sapphire Rapids or later. In terms of GPUs, and this is just a short list, there's more coming. There's a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs. And again, both live migration and high availability are supported. You can do this within a cluster. You can even do this standalone. So if I had 2 standalone servers with no clustering set up at all, I can live migrate VMs with GPUs between them with nothing but a network cable. Supporting us, Windows Server, but let's actually show it to you. What does GPU-P look like? So right off the bat, here I am in Windows Admin Center. And I want to show you, I have 4 hosts. And each one of these hosts right below it, you can see has an NVIDIA A2 GPU inside of that, each of the hosts. You can see I have virtual machine assigns to each of these. You can see the second host, it has 16 partitions. Now the rest of them only have 4. And I want them to all have the same number of partitions. So let's actually go and configure the partitions on this GPU. All I'm going to do is select that system, click on Configure Partition Count, and now I can come in here and select the number of partitions. And I want it to be 4 because I want it to match and I want it to be symmetrical with the rest of the cluster. I want a homogeneous GPU partitioning configuration. So now I've configured that. I go back in here and you can see now this host has 4 partitions. But let's go ahead now and assign that to a virtual machine. Okay, real simple. Click on Assign Partition. Come in here, select the virtual machine. I want to assign this to this partition. And just like that, I just click on Assign Partition, and it's done. Now this is configuration. But let me give you a sneak peek at actually what it looks like in terms of performance. So we're going to actually bring up a number of running virtual machines. Here I am running a traditional Hyper-V VM. There is no NVIDIA adapter. You can see it's just the Hyper-V video. This is just stock Hyper-V GPU, okay? I'm going to bring up another window, and you can see this one has the NVIDIA driver in it. You can see, there it is, guest side. Inside the virtual machine, I have given that partition to it. So let's fire up a couple of GPU tests. So on the right-hand side, we're going to go ahead and bring up the web sample of our aquarium. You can see there's 500 fish selected, and it's running at a whopping 4 frames per second. No GPU acceleration, it's just synthetic video, not surprised. And again, that's only 500 fish. If we go to the left-hand side, let's go ahead and fire this up. This is 5,000 fish, so it's 10 times more, and we're getting 30 frames per second. Now, I do want to keep in mind this is multiple RDP sessions, so if it looks a little chunky, it's because we're actually doing multiple RDP sessions. Let's bring up a second window, and you can see, oh, by the way, it's still doing 30 frames per second. There's no drop because they are individually partitioned between the virtual machines. Let's bring up a third one. Again, 30 frames per second. Fish are flying pretty well. And just for giggles, we actually brought up a fourth one doing something completely different. Just rendering some video. And so GPU partitioning allows you to take assign GPU partitions to virtual machines so that you can use it for whatever you're looking for in terms of workloads running inside the virtual machines. Now, that isn't all we've done with GPUs. I told you we have GPU with DDA today, with device assignment. We improved this as well. So there are people that still like the fact that I can take a full GPU and just map it inside the virtual machine and it's the full GPU. But we wanted to improve that with high availability. So we're introducing GPU pools. This is so you can group GPU pools to get high availability. On every node, you create a PCI Express resource pool with the same name and add the GPUs to the pool. So that during a failover, guess what? Cluster will start the VM on another and assign the GPU to the virtual machine, and you will continue in a clustered environment. I do want to point out this is HA only. This is not live migration. It really will never be live migration because it's DDA. You get that with GPU partitioning. In addition, on the Hyper-V side, we're also bringing dynamic processor compatibility to Hyper-V. And this is great for folks like yourself that say, hey, you know what, Jeff, last year we bought a cluster, and it's Intel Xeon Scalable 3rd generation, and you know what, I realized I bought 4 nodes, and I really should have bought 6. So I went back to my partner, and I said, hey, can I get 2 more? And they said, well, we don't sell that anymore. We sell the 4th generation. And so with dynamic processor compatibility, you can add new hosts to the cluster. And the way this works is when the systems are actually coming up, clustering looks at all of the processors across the cluster. And it determines what are all of the processor features that are available. If this is a homogeneous set, if this was all 3rd gen, they're going to get the full compatibility. But if this is 3rd and 4th gen, it's going to look all across those and go, well, wait a minute. You have 3rd gen, but the 4th gen have these additional features. We're going to mask those off. It means you get maximum performance, you get maximum compatibility, and it makes it easier to scale out your hardware. Also on the Hyper-V front, so this has been around for a while. Generation 2 virtual machines, this has been around since 2012. But I want to urge/stomp up my feet. If you're using Hyper-V Generation 1 VMs, you need to stop. Generation 2 VMs, we're gonna make this the default. Okay, we've been defaulting to Generation 1 for far too long. There's some big advantages with Generation 2 virtual machines. Performance and scale. Generation 1 VMs are limited to 64 virtual processors. You can go all the way up to 240 if you're running Generation 2. You also get secure boot, you get TPM, you get a UEFI firmware, and you get dynamic features like hot add capabilities that you don't get on Generation 1. It's a no-brainer. Every single OS that we support is already supported in Generation 2. So we're going to make that default for all of our GUIs. And that's in Hyper-V Manager and Windows Admin Center and more. All right. We've talked about storage. We've talked about AD. We've talked about going NTLM-less. Let's talk a little bit about networking. Again, not a lot of time, so I'm going to breeze through this one. Oh, there's a bunch of stuff coming to networking. Network ATC. Intent-based networking deployment. One-click deployment and drift remediation. You basically point to an adapter and say, what does this adapter do? Does this do storage? Great, we're going to configure this for storage. We're going to configure all of the offloads and everything you need to do in hardware, we're going to take care of that for you. And if it drifts, we'll fix it for you. Network HUD. Always on alerting and remedial operational for network issues. Who doesn't need help solving network issues? Guess what? Network HUD is there to help you with that. SDN multi-site. So you need to move workloads between multiple sites. You got containers, you got kube. Guess what? It's all transparent with SDN multi-site. Again, don't have a lot of time. I'm going to continue right along. Massive gateway performance improvements in the SDN gateway. And there's a whole bunch of stuff we're doing with hybrid AKS to make all of this seamless, high performing, low CPU utilization, and more flexibility across multi-sites. Speaking of AKS, containers. We've been doing so much work on containers, starting all the way back in 2016, 2019, 2022, and we have kept our foot on the gas pedal in vNext. The container-based image portability. You can now run Windows Server 2020 containers on vNext, and you don't need to upgrade the base image. It just works, okay? It's there. We've reduced the image size with smaller deltas. We've improved app compat very quietly for Nano Server. Nano Server is that teeny tiny little container image we have. It's less than 100 megabytes. It's 64-bit only. It's optimized for cloud native development. It's quietly very, very popular. The downloads we see for this are mind-blowing. And this is just a sneak peek at some of the things in containers. All right, time for me to pass it back to Eldon to talk about next generation file services.
All right, thanks, Jeff. All right, let's talk about file servers and file services. Let me talk about SMB over Quick for a second. So what SMB over Quick is it allows you to do secure connectivity, secure and encrypted with TLS 1.3 connections over the internet. And so this is a feature we actually introduced. It's in the Azure edition, Windows Server 2022 Azure edition. And we've just had a lot of people clamoring for it and saying, I really want this feature. It is amazing. Please give it to me beyond just Azure edition. And so you asked for it, and so we listened. And so one of the things that's coming in vNext is we're going to be having Quick available in all editions of Windows Server, whether it be Data Center, Standard, and everything else.
Hold on, Eldon, hold on. You get SMB over Quick. You get SMB over Quick. You get it. Oh, sorry, I'm done. I'm done.
So it's coming everywhere. So let me show you about it. So maybe you haven't heard of SMB over Quick before. So let me just kind of show you what it is. We'll walk through the scenario. So I'm going to do a little demo here. So first I'm going to start out. We're going to open up just a dock on a local file server. So imagine we're sitting on our laptop in our network in my office. And so we go open a file. Of course, we always got to have pictures in any SMB demo of Ned's dogs, are always in every demo. So we got a little dock with a bunch of Ned's dogs in it. And we can see we got access to the dock. And so what we're going to do now is I'm going to log off. And so let's imagine I'm off. I'm going to go walk over to, I'm going to get my laptop. I'm going to go decide I want some coffee. And I'm going to go walk over to a coffee shop. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to open that same dock, right? So I'm going to go. I got a dock sitting on my file server. I'm going to go try to access it. So I'm going to go open that up. And as we know, for the last 20 years, you can't just go to your laptop and just click on a file that's on your file server sitting in your data center. And so you'd have to configure like a VPN, you'd have to connect in to be able to do that. So very cumbersome. So now I can just go into WAC. So I can go into WAC and you'll see that configure SMB over Quick for internet access over the internet. I can then look and assign a cert from my cert repository for it. And then I can decide how do I want to connect to that. So I can assign what name do I want to make available to that. And then I'm just going to go and say, OK. And so it's really just that simple. So I'm going to go enable that. And now it's configured. And so now let's go do that same thing. So I'm on my laptop in the coffee shop. I'm going to try to open that same dock. Now I'm able to access that securely over the internet from the coffee shop and open the file. If you look at the protocol, now if we go look, you can now see you're actually accessing and opening that file using Quick. So that's the protocol. So now you have complete access to your data from your file servers no matter where you are. So we introduced SMB over Quick in Windows Server 22. Now it's coming to all editions, but we're continuing to innovate on what you know in 22. So what you saw there was that you can configure access on the server side. You can also now in vNext assign access from the client side. So you can say only these clients are allowed to access in addition to just turning it on. So you can control who can have access to it as well. We also are bringing some more flexibility around disabling NTLM. So imagine you on your server have some legacy app that you need NTLM enabled for, but you want to disable it for SMB. So now we have the ability to disable NTLM, at an SMB level, and we expose that via group policies, via PowerShell. So now you have greater control on disabling NTLM. So let's talk about brute force attacks for a second. So these have been around forever, right? So it's brute force attack, where you're just going to try different passwords. You're trying password 1, password 2, password 3. Whether you're going to do dictionary attacks, where you're taking common words in the dictionaries and trying to come up with, clever, combinations of them. So brute force attacks have been around forever. So one of the things that we have coming in vNext is that we put in an SMB authentication limiter. And so basically it only allows a source to authenticate. We put in basically a 2-second delay, so that slows down the amount of authentications that can happen. So for example, let's take this scenario. So if you're going to do 300 brute force attacks a second for 5 minutes, right, you're going to get 90,000 password attempts. And that, what would take normally 5 minutes, you could accomplish from a brute force attack in 5 minutes, will now take about 5 hours. And that's just us slowing down and having a limiter on how fast those brute force attacks can happen. So that's just trying to provide some more protection from brute force attacks.
Actually, it's 50 hours, not 5.
Did I say 5?
You said 5.
Thank you.
50.
Missing a 0. What's a 0? Let's talk about SMB signing. So SMB signing is available in Windows Server 22 as you know today, but now we're just trying to make the system secure by default. So SMB signing is set to required for in vNext, and that's just about, we're trying to raise the bar and make the system secure by default. So you just install it, and you don't have to think about it, and you're going to be secure by default. We also give more control around SMB dialects. So if you want to talk SMB2, SMB3, and giving you greater control with that. So let me kind of show you what that looks like. So you can actually go into group policy, and you'll notice you can mandate a minimum version of what you want to have the protocol version. So you can say, I don't want to talk anything lower than a specific version. You can also set if you want to have a maximum version. So this just gives you greater control that if you want to say what versions of SMB you want to allow to be communicating on your network. We also wanted to, in making the OS more secure by default, we also want to provide some more hardening of the SMB firewall rules. So a lot of the firewall rules were actually pretty old, right? From back in the day, and specifically around like NetBIOS. So a lot of the NetBIOS, when you install a file server, we punch open all the firewall ports around NetBIOS. And so what we're doing is that we're saying, hey, let's dial back on some of these legacy requirements, by default, and to make the system more secure by default. And again, here you can just kind of look at it. We're just, in vNext, we're just going to, they're still available. The firewall port rules are still there. You can easily go turn them back on if you want to. But we're just trying to make the system more secure by default in the way the system ships. And this is just the beginning. We're going to continue to work on this in Insiders, and we're going to be trying to harden more of the ports and just trying to open as little as possible for what is a modern system. So this is the one that probably gets me the most jazzed up. I'm going to be honest. This is the one that gets me really excited. And getting to vNext is going to be the easiest you've ever had. So as you know, on your Windows 11 devices, right, what do you do when a new update comes out, a new version comes out? You just open Windows Update. You see a little thing that says, the next version of Windows is available. Do you want to upgrade? And you just say, yeah. And you click the button, and then it sucks it down. You do a single reboot, and voila, you're up and running on the next version. Upgrading Windows servers, we've never had that. It's always been really hard. We are now going to have that in vNext. So you're going to be able to just go into Windows Update, you're going to see the latest update, you're just going to be able to hit Update, and it's going to update your system from the old version to the new version. So if you're running like on Azure, for example, it's very difficult to try to present the setup media into the VM. It's very hard to upgrade this. So specifically, if you're running your VMs in the cloud, you're really going to get a great advantage in a simple upgrade story and getting to the vNext. Now, it's fully manageable and controllable, so some of you are probably going, uh-oh, I don't want my junior admins just like opening Windows Update and going, cool, next version, and it hasn't been approved. So it's all group policy controlled, so for everybody here, don't totally freak out. But the goal is we're going to make it really, really simple to stay current, get current, stay current. We're putting a lot of effort into ensuring app compat to relieve the burden's on me, right? Your ability to upgrade to the next version, that burden is on me to ensure app compat. The days of 15 years ago, 20 years ago, where there would be all these breaking changes on a version upgrade, that is not the way we think anymore. And you shouldn't go spend a year validating every single app and doing all these full test passes and making sure everything works and being super scared before you hit the upgrade button. That burden's on me that I want to make sure that you can upgrade with confidence. So there's a lot of people who, are going to the cloud, there's a lot of people who want to stay on-prem or are going to have part of their install base be on-prem for a period of, and I embrace that, right? So I embrace if you want to stay on-prem, and they say, hey, how do you bring the power of Azure to me? You're doing all this great innovation in Azure, how can I take advantage of it on-prem? And so Arc is our strategy around how we bring those services to you in a hybrid model. And so today, enabling Arc is pretty tedious. It's kind of a PowerShell script. It isn't very easy. So one of the things we're doing in vNext is we're just easy button here, right? It's just, we have a little wizard, and you can go install this, and you can get Arc enabled very simply and on a server starting with vNext. Actually, we backported some of this for 22 as well. We're also bringing a bunch of foundational work to vNext. So for example, Wi-Fi, we've had people say like, hey, I have servers that are out in a branch office and Wi-Fi connectivity is very fast. Now I want to have Wi-Fi. Okay, Wi-Fi is now there. Other things we're bringing, Bluetooth. People are like, I want my Bluetooth mouse to be able to work with Windows Server. All right, we brought Bluetooth, so Bluetooth is now there too. So we're bringing some of the foundational things, which I just kind of consider fundamentals, right? These are kind of fundamentals, which may be the way we thought of servers 10 years ago as the world has evolved. So we're kind of modernizing Windows Server. And then another thing I want to talk about is we're going to have a new model for purchasing Windows Server. So as you may be familiar with Azure Stack HCI, it's in what we call in a pay-as-you-go model, in a pay-go model, where you can then you can bill through Azure your Azure Stack HCI. SQL Server in their last version also introduced pay-go and the ability to switch from a CapEx model to an OpEx model. So instead of just buying a perpetual license, you can now buy effectively a subscription and pay as you go as what you want to pay for. So we are also going to introduce this in the next version of Windows Server. And so when you install Windows Server, you'll have the ability to effectively select. And so here you'll have a radio button, and you can choose to say, use a product key, which is the same way you've been acquiring Windows Server with a perpetual license for the last 20 years. You get a key, you put it in, and then you have the perpetual license. And whatever purchasing models you use today will all still be there. But you can also choose this new pay-as-you-go. And when you select pay-as-you-go, we are then going to enable it through Arc, and we're going to bill through Azure Commerce, and so you can have a single billing system, whether you have that small number of systems which are on-prem, and if, let's say you've moved most stuff to the cloud, but you got a few things left on-prem, you don't want to have two purchasing models, or you want to switch to an OpEx purchasing model, you can do that as well. And this could also, kind of the scenarios we think about with this is it'll be very flexible. So let's say you just need, you got Windows Server Standard Edition, gives you 2 VM rights, you need like a third or a fourth, or you have like Christmas burst scenarios, you need to scale up for a month or two, and you want to scale back down, you just want some burst scenarios. So we think those are kind of some of the interesting scenarios where people may want more subscription-based pricing for Windows Server. Excited about licensing. We thought that was going to be the most exciting slide, licensing. Everybody wants to talk about licensing. This is one I just want to address. So people ask questions, hey, what's the story going to be for M365 apps running on Windows Server today and on the next version? And so, and this is important for everybody running remote desktop services. So if you're running remote desktop services and you're running it on-prem, you want to, and having M365 app support is critical to you. We embrace you, we love you, it's not going anywhere. That's the key message I want to deliver here. So today, we support M365 on Windows Server 22 for the mainstream support cycle. That's the first 5 years of the release. And then we do releases, as you know, every 2 to 3 years of Windows Server. We're going to continue that story with vNext. So again, vNext, we will support M365 apps on vNext for the mainstream support cycle. And it's a really easy story, right? So we, first 5 years of support, we releases every 2 to 3 years. So as long as you stay current, you stay secure, you stay supported. So we got a link there where you can learn more. So we support you. And with that, Jeff, take us home.
Thank you, Eldon. So, hot patching for everyone. Big changes in Active Directory. Big changes in Hyper-V, GPUs, scalability, performance, security, moving to an NTLM-less world. Oh, I love just saying that, makes me so happy. Container innovation, desktop experience innovation, SMB over quick for everyone. If you haven't gotten excited yet, one last thing, we still haven't shown you everything.
Still a lot.
There's some still stuff bunch of stuff that we're still holding back. You're going to have to follow us. And the best way to do that is download the Windows Server vNext Insider builds. Please. You can start playing with some of this stuff already. Who doesn't want a 70% performance improvement for their storage on NVMe? It is ridiculous. I showed my friend Bob the other day over in SQL. He's an architect. He was like, boom. He's like, I'm going to have my guys run HammerDB on this thing immediately. He was so excited. So if you want to learn more, download the Windows Server vNext from Insiders. And we would love to get your feedback. Okay, we're celebrating 30 years of Windows Server this year, and it's for folks like you in this room. Thank you so much for your support. We're so excited to deliver more features, more capabilities, and more innovation. Are there any features we're missing? Are there things that you'd like to see in desktop experience? Do your VMs run as expected? We all want to hear about it. So follow us at Windows Server Insiders community.microsoft.com. With that, I want to say thank you very much. Please fill out your surveys. If you enjoyed this session, my name is Jeff Woolsey, and this is Eldon Christensen. If you did not enjoy this session, my name is Jeffrey Snover, and this is Mark Rusinovich. Thank you very much.